All right, let's get right into it. Japan just made history, naming its first ever female prime minister, Sanae Takaichi. But, her first speech wasn't the celebration you might expect. No, it was a massive economic warning shot that echoed across the globe. She basically declared that a core idea of modern life, work-life balance, is now a luxury that Japan just can't afford.
And boom, there it is, the quote that sent a shockwave through the world. She didn't just propose a new policy, she made it personal, telling the whole country it was time to work like a horse. I mean, think about that. The rest of the world is experimenting with 4-day work weeks to boost well-being and productivity, and Japan is sprinting in the complete opposite direction.
So that really gets us to the heart of the matter for this explainer. What is going on here? Is this just a desperate last-ditch effort to keep the lights on? Or is this a cold, calculated, and maybe even necessary strategy to pull the entire economy back from the brink of collapse?
To figure that out, we have to look past the shocking headline. We need to dig into these deep, structural cracks that have been forming in Japan's economy for decades now. Let's really unpack the why behind this whole thing.
Now here's what's so fascinating. The core of the problem, it's not what you think. It's not about workers being lazy or inefficient. It's something way more fundamental and, honestly, a lot scarier. Japan is literally running out of workers. And this slide just lays it all out perfectly. Japan is caught in what you could call a demographic vice grip. You've got a rapidly aging population, a workforce that's shrinking faster than any other developed country, and on top of all that, a deep cultural resistance to mass immigration, which, by the way, is the exact tool most other wealthy nations use to solve this exact problem.
So when you see that demographic cliff, you really start to understand why this is such a hard right turn. The previous government, Kishida's administration, was pushing this new capitalism idea. Gentler policies, higher wages, better well-being, all in the hope that it might eventually encourage people to have more kids. Takaichi's approach just throws all that in the trash. She's essentially saying, we are out of time for slow and steady.
Okay, so if the why is all about demographics, let's get into the how. What is the brutal, cold-hearted calculation behind a strategy that demands more work from fewer and fewer people?
In Takaichi's mind, it seems to be a very simple zero-sum game. The country is at a fork in the road. Option A, you accept that the economy is just going to shrink permanently, as the population does. Or option B, you find a way to get more work, more output, from every single person who is still working. And she has made it crystal clear she's chosen option B.
And you have to read between the lines, because this choice sends some really powerful messages. It's basically an anti-immigration policy without saying the words. It's a signal to her conservative base that preserving cultural homogeneity is a top priority. And really, at its core, it's a brute force solution. It's a bet that just piling on more hours will, by sheer will, create more economic output.
But here's the great paradox of it all. As you can see here, Japanese workers are already famous for putting in incredibly long hours, but their actual productivity per hour is way behind their peers in other G7 nations. It's a hangover from an old corporate culture that saw just being present at your desk as a sign of loyalty. Takaichi is gambling that even more time at that desk will force people to get more done.
So if you want to boil it all down, it's this. The new prime minister is buying time for the country. Time for new technologies, maybe AI or automation, to finally kick in and save the day. And she is paying for that time by taking out a mortgage on the health, the personal lives, and the well-being of the entire Japanese workforce.
So this brings us to the high-risk equation, right? What are the possible outcomes of this massive national experiment? On one hand, you could see a huge windfall for corporations. On the other, you could see catastrophic nationwide burnout.
Now, let's look at the potential upside. In the short term, this could actually work. If the government loosens the rules on overtime, key industries like tech and manufacturing could see an immediate, even if it's artificial, spike in their output. To investors, that might look like a sudden, amazing productivity boom.
But then you get to the first major downside, a potential wage squeeze. I mean, think about it. If people are working way longer hours, but their base pay isn't really going up, which is pretty likely, they have less time and, frankly, less energy to go out and spend money. That could actually cause consumer spending to drop, hurting the whole domestic economy.
And then there's the second, and maybe even more dangerous, risk: a talent exodus, a brain drain. If you're a young skilled worker in Japan right now, the message is loud and clear. Your personal life is now second to the national mission. That could easily push the best and brightest to look for jobs in countries that actually value a work-life balance.
And we absolutely cannot talk about this without mentioning this word, Karoshi. It's a Japanese term, and it literally means death by overwork. This isn't a metaphor. It is a recognized, documented social problem in Japan. Takaichi's policy risks pouring gasoline on that already tragic fire.
So what we're really watching here is an incredible economic high-wire act. It is a massive, nation-sized gamble on the future, and it's being led by a prime minister who's already being called Japan's new Iron Lady.
When you strip everything else away, this policy is sacrificing one of the greatest social achievements of the modern era, the boundary between your work life and your personal life. It's a full-throated rejection of the soft capitalism we see in the West, all because Japan feels it's facing a truly existential crisis.
And that leaves us with this final, massive, unanswered question. The whole world is watching to see if this gamble pays off. Can Japan's workers really work like a horse and pull their struggling economy out of the ditch? Or will the immense, crushing burden of all this overwork just break the whole system for good?